So this is the American Lock 1100 series. This is kind of the quintessential green belt lock. A lot of people pick this lock for their green belt. And today we're gonna go through picking it. I'm not exactly a huge fan of this lock for green belt, to be honest. It's got kind of muted feedback, which I don't think is the best for learning. And it also has, as you can see when I use this 1.2mm tensioner, there's a lot of core wiggle, which I'm just not a fan of picking. Essentially, there's a lot of looseness in this that I'm just not a fan of, but it is a very common pick for the green belt level. If you get good at this lock, the skills do transfer, so it's not like it's a terrible lock to learn. I just think there are more fun locks to play with at the green belt level, like the Ace 38, things like that. There's definitely a lot of serrations, a lot of spools. The spools even have serrations, if I remember right. Feels like I'm probably pushed one too far. There we go. Still binding. There we go into a false set. Come back to one here. Touching one gave me a little bit of a deeper false set. And it is counter rotating, and we're open. So right away I want to cover some common problems that I see with people with the 1100. One of the first things you'll see people do when it comes to the 1100 is you just picked it, and what you're going to do is you're going to close this, and when you do that, you notice this bad boy just rotated itself all the way around, and it's pretty loose. It can go quite a way. Don't go all the way that the drivers enter the chamber. If you do, it might be a pain in the butt. Actually, let's just see if we can actually get that to happen. I don't think so. It's pretty tight, so it doesn't let you do it. But you're not going to be able to get it open with the key or anymore. All you have to really do is, I could have done it with the pick there, or grab your tensioner, just turn it back to the locked position. And then you heard it locked back up there. And once you're set like that, you're fine again. That's a really common question we see. So I thought I'd point that out. We'll go ahead and gut this lock. So let's get the camera adjusted while the lock is here. Try to get it set nicely. I think that'll do well. So to gut this, right away in the top, we have a Phillips. When they're brand new, there's nice Loctite on there. Make sure you get the correct Phillips. I believe it's the Phillips 0. Don't quote me on it right offhand, but get that screw out, and you can see it definitely has Loctite on it that from the factory is quite effective. And then come here, you have this faceplate and this faceplate stud. Just remove those, and then the core will fall out. The ball bearings and actuator will stay in as long as you don't close the shackle up on it. So we're just going to leave it like that and take a look at our core. So with the core in the locked position is the best way to get this C-clip, this retention clip off. So we're going to go ahead, just push that off. These can be some of the biggest pains in lock picking, but get that off. Now your core retention's off, so as soon as you put the key in, you're able to rotate it and slide it. If you have a key, use it when gutting. It just makes gutting a lot easier. In this case, what we're going to do is we want to rotate it so that the thicker part is actually towards the top, towards the drivers, And my recommendation for pretty much all gutting activities involves using a shim to minimize problems. So I will go ahead and demonstrate how we would do that. So here's some core shims. Didn't look like I had one out on the table already, so just grabbing them and getting one out for use. What you're gonna do is take your shim and insert it following those drivers. That driver line, just like that. Get it all the way up to the front so that you can feel it stop on that core lip. And then grab your follower, and you can use, you know, either side, but I'm gonna use the side that'll let us that'll let us see the drivers. Make sure you line up the top with the driver. Don't put the gap like this or the drivers are gonna wanna fall down. And then just go ahead, and I like to shove the core, or hold the core in place and then shove the rest of the setup over onto the follower. Just like that. I'm gonna set that here for now. And then I did have my finger there to make sure that the pins did not fall out. So most American lock cores have 5 pins, 1 empty. There are some that are made with 6 pins in them using the Master Lock 410 core, which is essentially the same one. I'm gonna go ahead and dump those out. I like to use a pick here if they're being stubborn. So there's pin 1, pin 2, pin 3, pin 4, and pin 5. And then I'll set that core up here. Grab my tweezers here just to arrange these. So you can see pin 1 was definitely a max lift. We got pin 2 there with even some serrations on there. The longer serrated key pins can be a trap for overset, where if you're chasing clicks and not how the pin feels, you'll end up getting clicks that you're chasing, despite the fact that the pin is not ready for it. And then this is a min lift slash pretty much zero lift. I'm pretty sure the core has enough slop that if you only have a couple of these that it'll open without being touched, but just touching this pin is enough to basically instantly move it to shear. And on the American locks, that matches your numbers here. So 1 is our max lift, then you have a 5 cut, 2 is the second, third, 8 is our minimum lift cut there. So this lock has both a max lift and a min lift in it, which is pretty fun. So the next thing is to take a look at the drivers here. You're going to go ahead and get your shim out of the way. I like to pull it out at this point. Oops. And then we're going to grab our tweezers and line this up in a way. You want to kind of try to show which pins are actually in which chamber and the orientation that they come out in. So try to get that on camera when you're gutting. I'm going to go ahead and catch pin 1 here and then let it loose. And you can see the springs are so weak it doesn't even push it out of the chamber. There's a spool in 1. So the spools in this lock 2 are spool rated. They have a little, you can see that little serration on that element there. So that's chamber 1. Chamber 2. Try to get it leaving the chamber there. It does not want to come out easily, so let's use gravity a bit. Those springs are just so weak. There you go. You can see that is a serrated pin. Into 3. Trying to get this in focus. There we go. 3 looks like another serrated pin. Just got to coax it out of the chamber because the spring is so weak. There's another serrated pin. On to 4. What you can do for once you get past the first three, I like to do is just actually come all the way back around and work our way from the back, just to make it easier for anybody watching to see. Now there's nothing in chamber 6, but chamber 5 should be populated. And actually it's even, the driver's actually stuck in there a little bit. Not something I usually see, but the pin is so weak that that driver doesn't even want to come out. So let's go ahead and kind of dump it out a little bit. There we go. You can see there was a spool rated pin in chamber 5. And then our last one's chamber 4 here. And get that guy to come out as well. It does stick out a little bit, but the springs are quite weak. There we go. Got our serrated pin there in 4. Spring in 5 is probably loose because it's constantly at a decent, it doesn't have to push very far at all. So, but all those springs are in there. I'm going to dump them out. You can see they're pretty tiny springs. Nothing special about the core except for this notch. So I do want to talk about this notch actually. So another common thing you'll see when reassembling, believe it or not, that notch is for this faceplate to line up like this in the core. But you can actually reassemble this lock backwards like this. And if you rotate, you'll even see all of the pins line up. So you can assemble this backwards, but what happens when you do is you have this little bit of tail piece now that's sticking. This part will stick into the faceplate and rub against the faceplate. This core doesn't have a lot of room in here, so it actually will rub against the faceplate, and it'll require an extreme amount of tension for you to open it. If you accidentally get your lock locked up like that, you can open it with the key still. You won't break the key, but it is going to require significantly more force than what you would be normally used to. So that is a common problem we see. So make sure when you're reassembling that you line up that notch with the face of the plug here. So all fully assembled or disassembled here. We got our springs. I have no doubt that this extra compressed spring was in 5, as that one was barely able to push out that spool. Again, probably just from this one's been picked to death by me during my learning days. So that's what our lock looks like. Let's see if we can get a little close up on these pins here. So you can see we did have a spool on the highest lift pin, which made the spool actually very active. There's another spool here on this 8 pin. That's why I was able to pick basically 3 pins before I got into a false set. Essentially, you have to be entirely on the spools, but this guy was already above shear as it's just sitting there in the lock with this guy fully compressed, which probably over time has compressed this spring a little bit. So that 3 pins that I picked right away were 2, 3, and 4, and then once it went into a false set, we rode this spool and just had to get this spool above the shear in order for it to actually open. So another thing that I can add as a little demonstration here, I'll zoom back out. This actuator inside this padlock is actually pretty strong. I'll actually dump it out for you guys here. So if you close it like this and pop your hand, you'll be able to actually get that actuator out. The shackle will come out. There are two ball bearings. There they are. So now we have the body and the actuator and our ball bearings all separate. Usually you don't have to disassemble anything this far to demonstrate stuff, but in this case you demonstrate this actuator spring is actually kind of tricky for a lot of people when they're picking. Essentially the lock turns like this in this clockwise direction when you open it. The core sits in here like this, and as it rotates it will actually move and compress, and I actually can't even get this spring to compress when I'm demonstrating here. That's how stiff this spring is. So this spring is quite stiff, and that means there's a decent amount of springiness to when you're trying to open it. And what happens is you'll get into a false set, and you'll think you're stuck in a false set when the lock's actually open. So you noticed as soon as I got into that false set, I kind of applied heavier tension, and that was to just test to see if I was actually already open. And then once you're finally open, you'll actually be able to rotate a bit more against this actuator. I can't even rotate this easily by hand at all because this spring is actually quite powerful. So strong actuator spring is present in quite a few locks, and that makes it very very deceiving sometimes when you get an open. So another common trick that you'll run into as a beginner picker. So hopefully that provides you guys some little tips and tricks on the disassembly, reassembly trick to watch out for as well. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys later.